Jordan Peterson has postmodernism in his shadow. And what I mean by that is the shadow in the Jungian sense. This underground part of him, a part of him which he knows but he cannot accept. In that area dwells postmodernism. And he's running away from it, clinging to Christ. So, how do I know this? I know this because Peterson is reacting to Nietzsche. His whole worldview and philosophy is an attempt to recognize that, is to attempt to cut off the most dangerous and terrifying aspects of Nietzsche. He didn't want to. He thought that it was impossible. If we were to embrace this Nietzschean notion of Dionysus, of chaos, of all order being perpetually undermined by this force of chaos, and that we must embrace chaos, we must befriend chaos. Jordan Peterson thought that was impossible, and it's quite justified that he feels that way. But of course, okay, so let's move on. So we have Peterson is basing his philosophy on Nietzsche. Nietzsche decrees that God is dead, and Jordan Peterson thinks, okay, there's now going to be a God-shaped hole in our souls, and we've got to fill it with something. Nietzsche thought that we could fill it with our own values. We could essentially make our own God. But of course, Jordan Peterson doesn't believe that we can make our own God. He thinks that we are too constrained by our reality, by biology, by nature, and by some universal law. There's something which is preventing us from doing this. We are unable. We cannot. So, the problem here becomes that Nietzsche himself was essentially a postmodernist. If we think about the phrase God is dead, essentially what that means is not only that God is dead, that Christ is dead, and that the Christian belief has now run out, past its expiry date, but it is essentially the same meaning as the postmodern phrase of incredulity towards meta-narratives. God is dead means that the truth is dead. It means that any objective standard, anything that is absolutely real and untouchable is now gone. We cannot believe it. And of course that's the same thing that the postmodernists felt. So I've always felt this way, that Nietzsche had all the seeds of postmodernism, and that we may as well just read our Nietzsche. The postmodernists, as far as I can tell in my reading, they seem to have not really moved the issue that Nietzsche addressed any further forward. They've simply demonstrated and infected every single possible aspect of society with this skepticism and suspicion that we must undermine every concept everywhere we see them. And of course that is just destructive. Nietzsche was the kind of person who would recognize that we're all running on the fumes of yesteryear. But of course he wouldn't attempt to convince everybody that that's the case, because he knew that it was too early, that they wouldn't believe him. And that in any case, if he didn't have another path forward, if he wasn't willing to embrace that path himself, then to simply to inform everyone else that they're running on fumes is not going to be productive. It's only going to usher in the catastrophe faster. Now, of course, he was an accelerationist. He wanted to usher in the catastrophe, but Nietzsche thought that he had at least the seeds of a new worldview, whereas all the postmodernist philosophers who followed him don't even claim to have that. So, God is dead means that Christ is lost and Dionysus is here. Okay, so Dionysus is chaos. Dionysus is he is energy. He is the god of revelry and wine. We consume our wine and we are overcome with passion. And we move and we dance and we sing. But of course we also destroy. And this is terrifying. And of course it was in the face of Dionysus that Christianity was built. Because we needed something to cover that up, to constrain it. We needed something to put the tamper on this Dionysian energy, because it is really terrifying. I mean, if you've ever been around adults having a temper tantrum, or being on, even just wasted, even just drunk adults, or people on crazy drugs, Dionysus, he's freaking scary, man. And so, just like the Christians for the last 2,000 years, Peterson clings to Christ because he's scared of Dionysus. Now, this is a justified stance to take. And Peterson thinks that he's resurrected Christ. He's created some new variant of Christ, which we can hold on to. But of course, I don't think anyone fundamentally can believe it. There really is enough evidence on the other end that this is simply impossible. It is a desperate clinging because we now must confront the reality of Dionysus, of chaos. For 2,000 years we have forgotten it, and we are not simply going to rationalize this question away. Dionysus will infect us if we do not address him. And we see this already. Dionysus has infected the revolutionaries. You see, the idea of communism and Marxism and neo-Marxism is effectively that we need to dissolve what we have, that the world, that the structure of society that we have, that's the enemy. We have to dissolve it. We have to destroy it. And once it's destroyed, the utopia will naturally emerge. But of course, this is just an fiction by Dionysus. These are the revolutionaries, are people who have not made Dionysus their accomplice. We need to make him our colleague. We must sit next to Dionysus and respect him. We cannot deny him. But at the same time, he is a terrifying and most powerful god, and he will infect us, and he will push us around and use us like toys if we do not rise to the task. So, there are many servants of Dionysus, and that's not what we should be. We should not be servants of chaos. We must be friends of chaos. We must be interlocutors and accomplices and enemies and dance partners with chaos. We must learn to befriend Dionysus.